I dedicate this book to my great-grandmother, Helen Bridges, her twin sister, Helena Bridges, my grandmother, Luella Macklin, and to all of my ancestors. I raise my spiritual glass to you, for it is filled to the brim with your blood, sweat, and tears that the universe has now turned into a sweet nectar for me to drink with delight. Because of this, I am full, I am pleasantly plump, and I am quenched. Chapter 1. The fires were raging throughout the plantation. Other masters who lost their slaves due to the Civil War were envious because Master Bridges asked his ex-slaves to stay and continue to work the fields in exchange for commodities and a place to live. Helen was glad they stayed because she overheard the grown folks talking, and they said a lot of slaves were killed or starving to death because they were just turned out with nowhere to go, like a lost herd with no direction. Helen's mama told her and her sister that they were lucky to have a kind master, but all Helen saw was another white monster who didn't want to lose his slaves. But she would never say that to her mama because she would take a switch to Helen's behind. Helen's twin sister, Helena, was just the opposite. She would say the first thing to pop into her fool head. And as always, her mama would whoop her with a switch. Of course, it didn't stop Helena from speaking her mind. Sometimes Helen could save her by putting her hand over Helena's mouth before she said something her butt would regret later. But that was only sometimes. Helen would ask her, she'd say, "Sissy, why can't you control what comes out of your mouth?" Helen would just look at her and say, "Folks don't want to see a nigger gal being too proud or speaking too free, like being a bird with one wing. Show me a bird with one wing, Helen, and I'll show you a bird who can't fly." She always said things like that, things that made you think. Helen just wished her sissy knew when to talk and when to shut up. They mama worked in the big house cooking for their master and mistress until the mistress died. After that, they mama spent most of her time taking care of Master Bridges. Helen and Helena had been helping their mama cook since they were knee-high to a grasshopper, as their mama would say. She made the best fried chicken and homemade biscuits and gravy this side of the Tennessee River. By the time Helen turned 5 years old, she could fry chicken and make biscuits that tasted just like her mama's. Her sister Helena baked the best cakes and pies. Helena's favorite thing to make was meat pies. They looked like apple turnovers, but meat was inside instead of apples. She would take pork or beef and wrap her special dough around it and deep fry it. The men folk who worked the fields loved them. It was fun to see Helena passing out meat pies and talking trash to the men folk. She was known as the little girl with the grown mouth. One day, Helena stole some snuff from Master Bridges. "Just take a pinch and put it in your mouth between your teeth and jaw," Helena said. "And why would I do that?" Helen asked. "'Cause when I see Master do it after a few minutes, his face looked like he high," Helena replied. "And why do I want to look high?" Helen asked. Helena grabbed her hands and said, "Show me a bird with one wing, and I'll show you a bird who can't fly. Don't you want to fly, Helen?" My sissy, a little girl who wanted to fly, Helen thought to herself. They both took a pinch and put it between their teeth and jaws. It stung like hell. Helen instantly spat it out and never did it again, but Helena kept it in her mouth. After a year, Helena dipped snuff on a regular at the age of 6. She would wait until her mama fell asleep, and then she would walk right outside of their quarters and sit under the big tree and do it. Helen would make sure her mama didn't wake up and catch her sissy outside and was glad to do it. Her sissy needed to fly, and Helen needed to protect her. Most nights the moon was big and full, and there were so many stars in the big black sky. It was a beautiful sight to see. But now all Helen saw were white monsters on their horses, setting fires to their crops and quarters and killing their family and friends. Helen and Helena were in their quarters when their mama busted through the door. She said Master Bridges was shot and killed and they had to hurry and leave. Their mama always had 2 bags she kept put away. In one bag was some clothes and quilts, and in the other bag there were bread and preserves. She also had money Master Bridges gave her to go to the store in the mornings. She couldn't read, but she could count. Master Bridges taught her how to count money, and she taught her twins. She also taught them about direction, east, west, north, and south. She grabbed the bags and told them to hold hands and to keep running no matter what they heard or saw. She said that once they reached the river, they would head north, and that would lead them out of the south. She told them to stay close to her, and they took off running through the woods. There was so much smoke they could barely see what was in front of them. One of the white men on a horse saw them running and fired shots their way. They didn't know their mama was hurt until they reached the river. She was shot in the back and was bleeding. She sat on the ground and told them which direction would lead them north, and to sleep inside of hollow logs when they got too tuckered to walk. She then took a hold of their hands and said, "I won't be making the journey with y'all. And when I close my eyes, y'all roll me into the river and you girls keep moving, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," Helen and Helena replied in unison. She looked at Helen. "I put the money in the bag with the clothes. You take it and make sure not to lose it. I know you always looked after your sissy, and she's gonna need looking after now more than ever. Remember what I taught you and take care of her and yourself," she said. "I will, Mama," Helen said. Then their mama closed her eyes and fell on her side. Just then, Helen and Helena heard something in the woods, so they ran and hid inside a hollow log for the night. Early the next morning, they ran back to where they left their mama. They prayed for God to take her soul to heaven where there are no slaves. Then they rolled her into the river. "What we gonna do now?" Helena asked. "We gonna do what Mama told us to do. We gonna keep moving till we get up north," Helen said. Helena started acting strange after their mama died and didn't talk since the day they rolled her into the river. It was like she lost her heart and soul, and the spark she had was gone. Helen thought maybe watching her mama die was too much for her sissy to handle, and her mind just snapped. Helen missed their mama too, but she couldn't lose her mind because it was all she had. The sun rose and set for 3 days since they escaped. They wasn't hungry or thirsty, and they still had food thanks to their mama. They stopped to rest one day when they heard a familiar voice calling out to them. "Twins!" he yelled. It was Teddy. He lived on Master Bridges' plantation too. They was glad to see him. He was a sight for sore eyes for sure. "Teddy!" Helena yelled as she ran towards him. Helen looked up at the sky and thanked God for giving her sissy a reason to speak. Then she ran to Teddy. He picked them both up and spun them around, and Helena was smiling from ear to ear. Teddy and Helena were best friends and was always up to no good together. Nothing major. Just little things like swiping old man Joe's corn liquor from his quarters and going out to the woods to take a snootful. Helen didn't see his mama, Miss Georgia, with him. She figured he was alone too, just like them. Helen gave him some bread with peach preserves and some water. "Where's Miss Georgia?" she asked. Teddy put his head down and said, "I don't know." "Was she with you when the fire started?" she asked. I was in the fields when Mama grabbed my arm and we started running. I couldn't see for all the smoke, but Mama saw y'all running to the woods and we was headed that way. Then Mama saw old man Joe. He was on fire. She told me to catch up to y'all in the woods and keep going. She said her and old man Joe would catch up. Then she ran over to help him. She pulled old man Joe to the ground and started rolling him around in the dirt. I couldn't move my legs. I never seen a man on fire before. Then I saw a white man with a gun coming for my mama and my legs got unstuck. And I picked up a rock and threw it at his head and he fell over. I think I killed him. The next thing I saw was another white man on a horse coming for me. So I ran to the big house and hid under the back porch. The white man couldn't find me, so he took off and started shooting at everything he saw moving. I stayed under the porch till daybreak. Then I went to look for Mama, but I couldn't find her or old man Joe. Teddy stopped talking for a moment as an attempt to control his emotions. All I saw was dead niggas all around. Some was burnt to a crisp. Some was shot. And some was hanging from trees with ropes tied around their necks. The whole place smelled like burnt toast. Then I heard somebody riding on a horse, and that's when I ran into the woods, Teddy said. Helen will always remember the look on Teddy's face. His eyes was bulging, and he kept biting his bottom lip. Teddy was only 9 years old, but at the time he looked around 14. In 5 days, he aged 5 years. Damn. Our mama gone too, Helena said. I know. I saw her floating face down in the river, Teddy said. Then they all just sat there for a spell with nobody making a sound. It was nice having Teddy with them. He was like their big brother and he protected them. And since they all shared the name Bridges, Helen and Helena started calling him brother. When they reached Kentucky, they saw a lot of black folks on their way up north too. And they was always so kind to them. Some gave them food, others gave them water, and some men folk would take Teddy with them and taught him how to fish and hunt wild game. Whenever Teddy came back with a mess of fish or a couple of rabbits, he would have a big smile on his face and his chest would stick out proud. It was because of Teddy that they never went hungry. The first time they met Miss Peaches, they was resting a spell when the smell of rabbit cooking filled the air. Teddy went to see who was cooking. Well, that's what he told them. The next thing Helen and Helena saw was a lady walking with Teddy and holding him by the ear. So this who you was stealing food for? She asked Teddy. Teddy didn't say anything, so the lady twisted his ear. Answer me, boy, she yelled. Yes, ma'am, Teddy replied. Then she looked at Helen and Helena. What's y'all name? My name is Helen. And this here's my sissy Helena. Please don't hurt our brother, ma'am. He was just trying to feed us is all. Miss Peaches rolled her eyes. I ain't gonna hurt him, gal. Just teaching the boy some manners. Yes, ma'am, Helen said. And don't call me ma'am. My name is Miss Peaches. Then she looked at Helena. What's wrong, gal? Cat got your tongue? Ain't nothing wrong with my tongue, Helena snapped back. Miss Peaches smiled. Oh, I see. You the wise ass. Then she looked at Helen. And you the one with all the sense, she said. And I ain't no wise ass neither, Helena said. Hush up, sissy, Helen said. Miss Peaches just laughed. Well, if you not a wise ass, you must be a dumb ass, mouthing off to somebody who gonna feed you. Now come and get something in y'all bellies. Then she let go of Teddy's ear and pointed at him to lead the way. Helen and Helena followed behind. When Helena passed by Miss Peaches smiled and said, "Let's see if you can chew as fast as you can talk, heifer." Helen never had rabbit that tasted so good. Cooking over an open fire was not her specialty. The rabbit was smothered in gravy and onions and cornmeal mush piled with gravy on top. It was delicious. After supper, they all sat around the fire. It was Helen, Helena, Teddy, Miss Peaches, her brother George, and her man, Mr. Stage. They was right down friendly folk, and they didn't seem to mind sharing with them. Helen, Helena, and Teddy stuck with Miss Peaches and her family. They was going up north too. When Miss Peaches found out the girls could cook, she taught them how to cook over an open fire. It took them a long time to get up north. There were underground caves they went through so the white men from the south wouldn't catch them. Teddy acted so brave, but when Helen looked into his eyes, she could tell he was just as scared as they were. When they got to a city called Chicago, Miss Peaches met up with a lady named Miss Lucy. Miss Lucy was very pretty with curly hair and beautiful hazel eyes. She looked like what the grown folk on the plantation called a mulatto. Miss Peaches and Miss Lucy knew each other when they was kids living on the same plantation before Miss Lucy got sold to a master who lived up north. Miss Lucy worked at a place where they cooked and sold hot plates. The name of the place was called Pearly Days, and it was owned by Miss Pearl. Miss Pearl was a tall woman with big breasts that bounced when she walked, and she had a very big voice. You could hear Miss Pearl far and wide if she yelled loud enough. Everybody knew Miss Pearl didn't play. She would slice your neck in a heartbeat if you crossed her. Yeah, Miss Pearl was a badass and Helen liked her. She liked them all.